Those of you who just joined in the last couple of seconds, we're recording. I hope it's okay. And if you wouldn't mind putting the name of your name and your bookstore name or your publishing name or whatever organization you're with in the chat, that would be great. Because we want to track everybody, keep track of everybody who's attended and be able to send you messages and stuff. Hopefully without being too annoying. They just keep coming.
Good. Well, we do have a big group.
Yeah, the cohort's becoming I don't know what, a massive cohort. They keep coming. We can make a second screen.
I've never seen that. Second screen. Except at Praveen's Reimagining Bookstores.
Yeah. How many screens did you
There's
have?
Liz.
So those of you who've arrived since the last automated announcement, if you could put your name and your bookstore or your publishing company or whatever organization you're part of into the chat, we'd appreciate it. Lisa and I. Wow. All right.
All this brain power on one Zoom call. This is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's like a supercomputer.
Mm-hmm.
Good. One more minute and then we'll start.
I think we've got most people, but if you joined in after Steve announced, we're trying to get everybody's name and bookstore in the chat, if you don't mind adding yours. I think we've got, let me have everybody's now.
I think so. So why don't we start? So, and we're also recording this call, just so everybody knows. For those who couldn't make it, there's a few people that wanted to make it. Oh, somebody's inviting us to the live notes. Excellent. So I'm going to share a short deck that Lisa and I prepared, and Lisa will start presenting and talking through it. It's just a guide that you're not, we're going to follow up with some materials to you, so don't feel like you have to make notes or screen shares or anything. Hang on one second. So Lisa, do you want to start? And I'll...
Well, actually, Steve, I think you were going to lead us too, but I'll be out of the first slide and do this. At the end of our long journey, at least to this point, we've come to the statement that bookstores don't need a cause. Bookstores are the cause. And I'm fresh from reading Jeff's book and feeling very much all of that. We put a statement together of a story branding style statement. Independent bookstores face an uphill battle maintaining their commitment to fostering community and promoting literary exploration. And our mission is to provide bookstores ourselves with access to new resources and partnerships so we can move on a sustainable path forward. And that's sort of our positioning statement. We're going to run through a number of things, but Steve, you were going to talk about the delta here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I will. So this is, don't trouble yourself with trying to understand this too much. Basically, what's fascinating to both Lisa and I is that after a long sort of journey to this point, talking to Praveen and others that Reimagine Bookstore as well, in the cohort, is that we have what, 2,500, let's say, bookstores, independent bookstores in this country, and a majority of them are run and managed by 3 or 4 people. You know, the staff is tiny, and yet because of the nature of the rich nature of what we're sharing, selling, and talking about, we have enormous leverage in terms of tools that we could use to reach more scale, to sell more books, to get more attention. And yet, you know, we have very limited resources and employee time, because we're also running a retail store besides a marketing company. And 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 limited finances, because a lot of bookstore owners, independent bookstores, are financing their they're bootstrapping. And so basically what we're trying to do with this project is, by gathering people together, finding some additional funding and resources, not from you guys, but other people, we're trying to provide some of these tools and strategies and skills to limited staff bookstores, all the way up to the size of, let's say, Kepler's even. That's all that slide reflects.
Well, I think you made the statement, Steve, when we were offline, that it's the biggest delta you've seen in any industry, really, between having the assets and the resources and not necessarily having a huge marketing machine to do something with those. And that the delta of opportunity is one that you see as being quite large. Is that accurate? Is that
Yeah, I always hesitate to use the word delta because it feels so techy, but but I can't think of a better word. Yeah, no, it's like
it's
it's
opportunity, yeah, if you will. Yeah.
like a seesaw with one little person at one end and a huge weight at the other. Yeah, the opportunity is incredible, and it's true of most small business. But most small businesses, like the laundry down the street, or the gift store or whatever, don't have the stories and content and amazing packaging that bookstores do to tell stories and to reach more people. So anyway, so then during the basically, this is what we've been talking a lot about, is that during the pandemic, surprisingly, a lot of bookstores survived and did well, actually, and a number of small publishers likewise. And that part of it was everybody adapting to working online using Zoom and other tools, social media tools. And the challenge now is, how do we use those skills, kind of the principles of what we were doing in the digital world, in store, in real life, and in terms of reaching out to other partners and marketing and within the store and display, and a whole lot of other of those tools that we just talked about, before applying them to the real world, which is where we primarily sell our books in normal times. Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
So there's a whole question of stability and sustainability, and then small business finance when it comes to bookstores. And it's solved not only by quantitative accomplishments like greater reach, and more people and more foot traffic, but also by the quality of what the bookstore both can show and then use as an extension of events and other partners. And that's a lot of what we wanted to talk to you about. And then soon, what we want to do is get your guys' feedback. So it isn't just us broadcasting our opinions, but we're really interested, because a lot of this came from many of you, which Lisa's going to talk about in a minute or two. Lisa, do you want to take over here?
Well, yeah. So, in the course of this meeting, we want to say, where we've been, how we got here, and where we're going, or where we think this group is going. And I think it's Gandhi that said, "With go as the people, I must hasten to follow them, for I am their leader." The idea that Steve and I are choosing, or just hoping to serve as facilitators in this process. And we're sort of an unlikely pair that have never met in person. And we met via Reimagining Bookstores, and yet we have had over 80 meetings together over the last year and a half of great lengths, and pulled in other people. We are not an organization of any kind. We're just two people from unique perspectives, and I really admire what Steve has done in the film industry and in the publishing industry. And we have kind of a peripheral background. And then, of course, I launched a bookstore in the past months, and I'm learning a whole new thing. And our bookstore will try to follow in the footsteps of Seminary Co-op as a nonprofit bookstore with book selling as the mission, which is sort of a heady and tall task. And I personally am interested in learning how to make this successful, because on my other part of life, Franklin Fixtures, I sell bookshelves and try to help booksellers get started. So figuring out what are some of the super sauces that we can bring to fore are important to find. So this is a volunteer initiative. And you have joined the cohort. And since Reimagining Bookstores Workshop, we've gotten to meet with a lot of neat experts from other industries, like Mike Manello, who comes from the world of filmmaking, and Ellen Schneider from also the world of PBS and the ideas of public, and just pulled in a lot of people with really interesting ideas. And 8 contributors, and of course Praveen and Peggy and the whole crew there that started Reimagining, along with you, the bookstore partners, and we've done 20 plus interviews and developed out of those interviews 4 strategic paths, if you will, that we've, our question was which of these paths, and I think the answers are kind of interesting. This is the cohort right now, so you can kind of see everybody's name on the same page. And this is a mixture of small, very small bookstores, nonprofit, for-profit, larger bookstores, and it also has some people who have no brick and mortar at all, and those who are I think we have a publisher in here, and potentially others who are from the bookstore industry and not necessarily with a brick and mortar. But it's neat to see such an incredible group. And I just want to, lingering on this slide for a second, if you think about the expertise that is in this, represented in this body of people, and what we have potentially to give to each other and to do together, it's just astounding. So I'm excited about the fact that you've decided to explore this, and that we can do this together. So what we've learned with the talks at the cohort, so we've had talks with most, but not everyone. And for those who I've not had a chance to connect with, my work won't be done until we have had that conversation. We took Otter AI and actually transcribed the interviews and pulled data from them, which is interesting. I'm going to cover that at a 5,000 foot level. Basically, storytelling and display was we asked the same 4 questions. And the first question was, how interested are you in things like storytelling and display, which is everything from telling your brand story all the way to use of themes and thematic quests, all the way to a story of one. And 100% of the people said, I'm interested in that. And about 95 plus said, I really don't know what you're talking about, but I'm interested in learning more, because there's
wait a minute, let me get this straight. So 95% of the 100% that were interested said they didn't know what you were talking about.
Exactly. Exactly. So the consensus there was, you're talking some interesting things maybe, but I want to lean into that. And then out of the conversations, like Lisa, most recently, Lisa Swayze, Buffalo Street, as we were talking about it, you have nonprofit background, and you were saying, we use the story of one and the nonprofits, and that could be interesting. And so there were things that started emerging, and that is what we're hoping to find. That's the reason it's beyond bookstores. It's the idea of, let's look beyond the bookstore itself and find our inspiration in things that have worked in other places, that maybe, as different as we are, we also share some similarities when it comes to engaging people. So that's one. So I think everyone was interested and didn't know what it was. Storytelling on display. So I think that sort of spells the path for a workshop to at least explore the concepts more. National advocacy was our second question. And the question was, how interested are you in linking arms and making a big change across the country as a national group, as a cohort? And there were a few for whom this was very important, and that view was shared by their customers and by the very way in which they're created. For the majority, it was what we heard was that it was important only at a local level, and that positive messaging and positive experience was the focus. There were concerns about the level of divisiveness and polarization in our society, and really wanting to focus on creating a space of welcome and rich experience and emotional safety. So that was a really interesting and perhaps unexpected result. There were a few that said, we'll never agree on what to advocate in exactly the same way, and that it wouldn't be worthwhile energy. But I think it's important that we honor those few for whom it's important, and perhaps there's several, a good cohort in the middle that says, I would love to do something positive and on a national scale, so long as that translates into a positive experience in my store and for my customers, and I'm not doing something that's going to create a disadvantage for the very mission I'm trying to pursue. So that was the second one. So we're going to wade into that, but expect to see subsets of the cohort in that. Innovative partnerships was the third one, and perhaps here we had the most resounding yes of all the interest inquiries. The question was, how interested are you in creating partnerships beyond the schools and libraries, which are important, but partnerships that are kind of unexpected? So everything from partnerships with, I don't know, a local boutique hotel or NASCAR or heavy metal or a plant shop, or, you know, just really thinking, or AMC theaters or Netflix, or thinking big and broadly about what innovative partnerships look like in your area, and how that helps us connect with people where they are and find new avenues to be, I think Kelly Justice said, less precious was her, and I liked that. That's just really stuck with me, and I'm trying to be less precious in my work, and say, because people come confessing to me all the time that they don't read or they haven't read, and it's like I need to forgive them or something, and I don't want to be that way. I want to be encouraging and welcoming, and almost like a swan, you know, a siren song, inviting them. And the fourth area that we asked everyone about was the community engagement. How interested are you in provocative messaging or using marketing tools like the tools that Steve has used his whole career, and like others use, some scintillating campaign or campaigns to help people explore and learn about, you know, something that is really unexpected in the community engagement area. And to a person, I think everyone agreed that this was a good area of learning and explorations. Some people added and kind of moderated their response, saying they didn't want to be provocative if provocative was negative. They wanted to be positive and welcoming and fun. Although I think there are some among the cohort that say, if you are provocative in a way that is a little disturbing, that actually promotes an invitation and dialogue. So it's not a one size fits all here, but the nuance is that some are interested and able to be more provocative in a negative way, or in a way that's maybe uncomfortable, and others need to be and want to position themselves as being very positive and welcoming and making sure that messaging. But altogether, we're very interested in learning more about community engagement and what it means, how we use those kinds of techniques. And the fifth thing that we didn't ask about, but that clearly came out, was that each person brings unique and useful experiences into this cohort. And Sherry, I don't see you, I know you're on the call, but you know, she had to go off the call a little for a minute, but I think she's in the World Hall of Fame for billiards, you know, for instance. And while that's not just an interesting fact, that's an interesting fact that's connected to a whole community of people. And interest, you know, and all of us have these communities that we've been associated with outside of and beyond bookselling, where we can bring some interesting things around partnerships and community engagement in a collaborative process. So our idea is that to take a facilitative role, not a training posture, but a facilitative posture, to help structure exploration of these four strategic paths.
Maybe that's great. Maybe this is a good point to stop and see who has questions about the results of the survey and the points that came out, which were very surprising to us. We started out thinking we were going to be dealing with book banning and, you know, the right to read, and perhaps, you know, the battle against distraction and non-reading. And in fact, it turned out that bookstores themselves are the causes, as we keep saying. But what questions, does anybody have a question or any kind of comment on all this? Just unmute yourself, and if you do, and if you don't, we can move on.
Steve, can you hear me? This is Brad.
Yeah, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple things about the comments, because I thought had a chance to think about this. And I think the thing about a national um, program of some sort is to work as a group to advocate books to prove the channel to publishers is an important thing. So that is maybe a little different than thinking about a program where we are trying to send a political message. And I think that's what people are really tired of, is the politics of it. And the other thing was that I think we need to think of ourselves as a subset of um, entertainment or education, just like baseball is a subset of sports. You may be a sports fan, but not a baseball fan. So when your customer or person on the street says they don't read, well, it may not be because they don't like reading or whatever, but they're just not the same kind of fan that they are in other areas. And then one of the things about partnerships that keeps coming to mind to me is because our Ace Hardware store is locally owned, and they have a large group where they work together for buying and such. And they might be one of those unlikely partners. So
Beautiful.
those were the things I was thinking about.
Those are really good
Those are-
points.
And Brad, you just illustrated the richness that Steve and I experienced in each of the conversations that we have had so far, is that each person to a person had these very clear ideas. And I love what you just added there, that national advocacy, because bookstores are the cause, national advocacy for bookstores as the cause is potentially an area of real traction. And I love the idea of a potential partner. I grew up in a hardware store, my granddaddy's hardware store, and weighing nails and such. And I always compare it to a bookstore, because it was a community space, and it still is. And the 23,000 hardware stores that existed 30 years ago are still in place, and people, just like indie bookstores, they haven't disappeared just because of Home Depot and those others. There's still that community space. So you're right. There's some beautiful, innovative partnerships that are potentially all around. So,
Yeah, and I will say this, that like a lot of people on this call, perhaps, I love browsing, but I also love browsing hardware stores as well as bookstores. I can spend more time in the hardware section, looking at screws and nuts, surprisingly. But anyway, that's beside the point. But those kind of partnerships came out too when I talked to a really terrific woman in Kansas City who basically was, selling books on the road, not out of a store, which I think sometimes booksellers wonder about. Question. And she was going into bars and all sorts of events and flea markets, but a lot of stuff you wouldn't expect. It was really fascinating. And she would curate the books for each different setting.
That was a gorgeous interview, and there were a lot of those. And as Jeff points out eloquently and in praise of good bookstores, the word browse has some really interesting roots and is at the heart of what we're trying to cultivate. It's an important activity all by itself. So we've got these 4 strategic paths: storytelling and display, national advocacy that is positive and productive for the bookstores themselves, as well as the communities we serve, new paradigms for partnering, and broader community engagement. So involving scintillating marketing and attracting the so-called non-readers, or baseball subsets, if you will, and creating more broad appeal. So doing all of this and doing it in a way that creates sustainable stores and shops that serve the broad needed communities and country, thinking locally, acting in ways that are applicable globally. So these are our 4 paths. So I'm going to tell about each one of these paths just briefly, just one slide per path. So one key strategy is focusing on the in-store display and storytelling methodologies. By creating bookstores foster that sense of place, that sense of community. And we've got 4 storytelling methods to explore. One that's specifically about telling your own story and making sure that when people leave, come in your store, they understand who you are. and get that feeling of local. And second, to make good use of themes in stories. We think in genres, but to think in themes that are interesting to people and engaging, and develop those themes like a good storyteller does. To do a thematic quest, which is more like a shared quest. I want to know how to train my dog, or overcome depression, or it's that thing that we're sharing, that we were trying to do together, which can pull together books from a lot of different genres. And then the storytelling, the story of one idea, which and several of you pointed out some of the cautions and practicalities around that, and others among the interviews said this is kind of interesting, because nonprofits make big use of story of one, museums make a big use of story of one. How can we do that better? So these are the four. In strategic path number 2, national advocacy. Again, we want to keep the focus local or work nationally. I love what you just said, Brad, about taking the idea of national advocacy for the bookstores, for the bookstores themselves, for bookstores as the cause that they are. And our hope is to provide resource for each level of interest that people have in national advocacy. And then strategic path 3. So, I already used the quote that Kelly did about being less precious. That our quote is our goal is to foster community partnerships that expand the synergies. So there's some really interesting research that suggests that indie bookstores, more than other businesses, elevate the performance around them, and which is something I've been using in community development. If we lean into that idea and think even bigger, Mike Manella introduced Netflix and AMC and national platforms with broad appeal, where there's a book connection, and said, as a cohort, we have the power to kind of talk with these industries, or talk across these partnerships at local level and maybe at the national level too, where people start making connections they haven't made. So the idea is going where people are. And fourth, broader community engagement, borrowing the very best marketing practices that we have. And I love the workshop that Jill has been leading on StoryBrand, and learning a lot from that. And, goodness, this group has so many good ideas, and is doing some ideas. And there's some even better ones, or even unused ones, I guess, that are out there that I think we can bring in and give trial to. So if we harvest some of the best ones from the group, we can maybe make use of the multiverse in good ways. So
I think also, as one of the people who attends Jill Hendricks's monthly session, the thing that we learned from that, or I learned from that, was that just getting people talking about what they're doing in their bookstore surfaces ideas for a lot of other bookstores, and that isn't done enough. There needs to be a lot more sharing between bookstores about what's working and what's not. And sometimes it gets down to nuts and bolts about using, POS systems, but a lot of times it's about, much bigger ideas about events and newsletters and stuff like that.
well, and you touch a point, Steve. We're with the workshops, our hope is that we engage in good dialogue, we get good ideas, and that we make sure that it's followed with action, because in the action we can then measure success, and we can measure how the action's working out. So the idea is talk together, develop an action, try that action, come back together, and really talk about and understand how those actions have improved or not, and harvest those lessons learned. The action is super important, and a big emphasis here. And so that's the part that we all play as part of the cohort, is to try things and then be willing to document and share them back to the larger group. And we want to measure success. Sales is the only one I can think of that's a shared, lagging it. It certainly matters to me a lot right now. And engagement could be a predictive indicator of sales. There are likely qualitative metrics that I'm not thinking about, which have to do with quality of conversation. Like, I would love a way to be able to capture the value of the poetry nights that we have once a month, and the community that's there, and the spirit of the thing. And it's 30 people, but it feels really different than 30 people for a different kind of event. There's a welcome and an encouragement, and there's a life to it. That's qualitative, and I don't know how to put a number or name to it, but I would like to find that. Feelings of safety, welcome, and sanctuary, those stories. So part of my background is in doing qualitative research. I'm really interested in those stories and those deep dives because I think they illustrate a lot. So if we have those stories that suffer, that we can elevate a document where people are feeling that sense of sanctuary, as they are in all of our stores, then I think that becomes part of a national picture that we're creating, or indicators of curiosity and interest. So measuring success, for sure, sales and engagement, but I'm interested in your thoughts on how we measure success. Next steps. And in May, we'd like to have a schedule of workshops for the balance of the year with your help, because we are looking for co-leaders and people who are willing to say, hey, I want to take part of the facilitation for this. It needs to be facilitated, action-oriented, trial and dialogue with measurable results. In June through August, we're targeting storytelling and display workshops and trials. July through November, we'll be looking at each of the national advocacy, innovative partnerships, and community engagement. So probably a couple of workshops in each as far as the structure. And this is where we really need or would and appreciate co-leaders. I can take off with storytelling and display and would love to work with someone or a couple of people. I don't want it to become too unwieldy, but if we have a couple of people that are interested in facilitating a national advocacy workshop, then we could do that, or the innovative partnerships. If we don't have any volunteers, we'll continue to structure this. Steve and I will continue to structure this through the end of the year, but I think it will be richer and better if we do have some leaders from this group to help structure the experiences. And again, what we're going to do is structure some content, but then a lot of the questions, so some new content and questions and dialogue that lead to individually chosen actions that we can come back and report on and measure. So that's
and so maybe what we should do now is I'll stop sharing the deck and we can talk among ourselves and see if there's anybody who wants to pipe in on any of this. I mean, at any level of either, well, what we said at the beginning, by the way, if you've arrived a little late, is put your name and bookstore or publishing company or whatever you work for in the chat, so we have a record of who is here. I've tried to work off screen shares of Zoom calls and it doesn't work very well. But I'm curious if anybody has any comments on this. We rattled through it very quickly because we don't want to take up a lot of your time, but we're really more interested in your opinions as well. And just unmute yourself, raise your hand, do whatever you want to signal that you want to say something.
Hey, Steve. So I'd like to say a couple of things. There's Praveen here.
Yeah.
So first of all, wow, thank you. This is amazing that you guys have put in 80 interviews. You guys have been meeting for 1.5 years and involved so many outside experts from various creative fields. So really just bravo to you and Lisa, and I know Wendy was working with you guys for quite some time too. This is very impressive. I just a quick question. I don't think I've fully followed the story of one concept and what exactly is that talking about. Can you maybe just elaborate on that a little bit for those of us who are not familiar with the story of one?
Yeah, the idea of a story of one is where you take one individual, think in terms of a museum, where you go and you literally dive into the story of one individual, and all of the displays are around that one person. So the story of one is an idea where either small or broad scale, where you take a single display and you are telling one person's story through that display. And that's something that we could explore in technique in a lot of different ways, but it's an idea that works really well in the nonprofit arena, where you say, this is a qualitative story. Yeah, for me, yeah. And so you say, here's a story, and and that story illustrates so much. And because we always say a book isn't written to everyone, it's written to someone, right? It's written to one person. And similarly, our displays can have the same quality, that One example that was created, I did this exercise at the American Library Association with 75 librarians, and they created stories of one. And at first, one of the librarians created a Taylor Swift display. And I was like, well, that's cute. Okay. But I said, let's go deeper. Let's have a little more heart in it. How about you tell your story? And so she took a step back, and I went and they drew it out on a piece of paper, what books they would put into the display and how the display would look. And she created a story of herself, and she was about to introduce her two daughters to their birth mother the next week. So it was a story of all the books that they had looked at, all the things, and it came together in such a rich and beautiful way, because you could feel all the feels, all the trepidation and all the things that they had been exploring. And it was books that came from lots of different genres, from fiction to parenting to self-help to, you had books old and new. And what was beautiful about it is it was richly genuine. And it also was diverse because it pulled from so many genres. And it was very, very interesting. You could just feel the heart. And even though, I'm a step parent, I don't have that exact experience to relate to, I felt it was very relatable myself. And I think a lot of people who felt that. So it's about, figuring out how to tell more of those stories of people that are real stories that kind of pull from lots of different places. And there's practicality with that. Jill and I, when we were talking about it, she said, how do you replenish the books and how do you keep things going? And that can be hard, and it's a very real concern. I did a workshop 2 years ago where a couple of booksellers did some beautiful examples of, one was a Korean American who did a shelf with a picture and cookbooks and just all around what cooking meant to her, and being from Korea and having that culture, her culture, as part of the culture here where she was living. So they were beautiful, beautiful stories. So hopefully that's kind of a little snippet of it.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Cool. Anybody else have a question, comment, brickbat? Volunteer?
Well, Steve, you had some in the deck, and when you get the deck, there's a lot of resources and a lot of ideas. So I think Steve took a stab at capturing some of the ideas and possible pathways under each of these 4 scenarios. So especially in marketing and in creating campaigns and that sort of thing, we've been far afield in our thinking, and breaking a lot of, at least my paradigms, as you've been. I don't know if you want to mention a couple of those ideas.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Early on, we were talking about tiny bookstores, little bookstores, the things you see kind of randomly on the street on a post that have free books. We were talking about better uses of those. It was going to be in service of an original idea of Lisa Schwartz should talk about her cat. It was going to be in service of banned books. We were going to say, why doesn't a bookstore distribute a series of those outside of their bookstore in the community, in front of the store or elsewhere, with banned books, and they're locked up, and if you want to read them, come to our bookstore and stuff like that. So we started talking about ideas that basically put you out more into the community. We've also talked about a lot of sharing of visuals of video and stills from experiences in the store and around the store, which I think is always really powerful these days, the age of TikTok. And so there's a number of techniques that brands have used who have great resources, people like Nike and all sorts of brands. But the question is, what can a bookstore do, and how can we help them get there, and what kind of support can we provide? And that's something that some of my contacts in the ad community are really interested in helping out with. So that'd be really good.
They have some feverishly good ideas, and it's impossible to pursue all of them. But there are a couple that, and some of the ideas are big enough that would require more than one bookstore to pursue them.
Right.
So to be able to connect with a Netflix or NPT nationally or something, and try something or create a fever around things. Would be it.
Yeah, I spent the month of February in London, and with my wife, and I spent a lot of time at the Daunt bookstores, particularly the one in Knightsbridge, and or in Marylebone rather. And it's kind of fascinating the way, and some of you may know about James Daunt. I've followed some of what he's done. He's running Barnes and Noble now and trying to turn Barnes and Noble into more of an independent bookseller, which is an interesting challenge. Yeah, but they do a lot of display, which is Lisa's specialty, not around genre or subject matter or anything. It's just this sort of instinctive tables of books that somehow fit together in a way you can't even explain. And it draws people in from the curb. It's fascinating. It draws people into this very large bookstore they have in Marylebone. You end up buying books there, but also a lot of it's about something Praveen has spent a lot of his time on, which is about cultivating a staff that's really expert at, not only knowledgeable of books and reading, but at dealing with customers and getting them excited about stuff and guiding them to different parts of the store that are not just, oh yeah, you want to go to the automotive section or the self-help section. It's not like that. It's more about, you might find either this novel, something interesting on, what you're talking about in terms of your feelings, or you might find this help book, that does the same thing. So part of it is rethinking even the internal organization of stores, which Daunt has really pioneered at Waterhouse and his own stores, and now at Barnes and Noble, I think. And one of the stores that I love is Anthropology, because they really mapped out a journey through their store that tells the story, of exploration in other lands. And a lot of the stuff in their original store, which was brilliant, you couldn't even buy. It was just there for display.
There's a store doors down from mine, or actually I'm having to move because of a number of floods. So the new location will be 2 doors down from a plant shop in my little town. And every business person would have said that a plant shop, a house plant shop, would never thrive, pardon the pun, in this town, because plants are expensive and there's already other shops and things already grow, and it could never happen. They opened 10 months ago and they have been just a phenomenon. Everybody wants the owner of the plant shop to be on their show, their radio show, or their program, or she was keynote for the local Upper Cumberland Women's, and the plant shop is hot. And when I walk into her shop, she's doing a lot of the pattern languages that I've learned about from independent bookstores. It's really fascinating. I'm like, you're doing 32 pattern languages right here. And she said, I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's working. It's working so very well. And it's those kinds of examples and partnerships that I think we want to pull into this dialogue together. And I feel uncomfortable right now because Steve and I are doing all the talking, and I'm much more comfortable having an interview where you're talking.
Well, I wanted to put somebody on the spot, if you don't mind, please. Jill, you've had these great workshops. Can you tell us a little about what's come out of that in terms of what you think bookstores can share with each other and such?
Well, I started doing marketing workshops because I needed to learn this stuff. It's like my weakness is marketing. So I'm really using it just right now as data collection to learn what kind of issues other people are having with marketing, where we're all struggling. I'm working with Eileen at Professional Bookseller School, so I'm hoping one day that there'll be a course on this that will fix my entire bookstore. But, so that's where I just feel like we're stronger together, but it needs to be really focused on what we're trying to achieve and come up with best practices. I think a lot of what we've seen in the past with ABA and whatever is they do these stories of one, Lisa, like this is this bookstore and it's how they're doing it. And this is this bookstore and it's how they're doing it. But nobody has like pieced together from all of that, the principles that you should learn. Like, okay, these 5 people are doing this. And what I hear is that all of them are doing this element. And if you're smaller, you want to start here. And then as you grow, so it's kind of trying to pull out these fundamental principles and guidelines for stores. That's what I'm interested in trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And that's a great point, Jill. And that's what we were talking, like 32 pattern languages. pattern languages are timeless, they're proven, they're in every industry. And over again, I see bookstores using the same 32. They're wildly different, but movable seating, a covered entrance, pools of light on two sides, face up display, open shelves. You can name the patterns, and those are the laws, and those are what we can really work with. The same is true in marketing too. And so I love that. I love that you say that. And
Yeah,
Jill,
no,
you
one,
always
one
have
of
such
the,
good
Lisa,
influence.
one of the principles that we had in my old ad agency, which did a lot of event and transmedia kind of advertising, is that you need to tell a story that people want to retell. And because we did a big kind of specialized promotion for some TV show, I can't remember what, some series. And it turned out nobody really was interested in the blogger received this big package of stuff because it benefited him. It didn't benefit them. But then we realized that if he was telling a story about something that would excite other people, that's a story that people wanted to retell. And there's a number of principles like that, Jill, and what you're, in marketing that would be really useful for bookstores. I think we ought to spread. I know, hey, Lisa, I know you've been talking to Sherry. I wonder if Sherry has anything more to share, so to speak.
I don't know. It sounds like she may be occupied right this
Yeah, I
second.
see. Yeah, she's.
Yeah. But Sherry is doing some really fun things in her downtown area with partners and with being outside, being and I mentioned her pool playing expertise and media expertise and some of the things that are fascinating to learn about. And I think that's something that we can draw into, into the conversation and into facilitate it. The question is, what is your superpower? What is your unique connection with a group of people that you're not leveraging today? That could be an out of the box partnership for you and bring you a crowd of people that might not otherwise find your bookstore.
And Brad, and talking to Brad, I know that he was doing some author events on the street in front of his store, which I think was out of necessity, maybe more, Brad, but do you want to talk about that? I thought it was fascinating. You're muted right now.
Yeah. My last name's too easy for you to remember. It's Jones. So, we have a real small store, 1,400 square feet, and it's packed. There's, at the beginning, we put some shelves on wheels thinking that we would be able to push them out of the way. But we just push them in the way of other people. So since California hadn't seen rain for a long time, we decided that we would just think about doing most of our events outside, whether they be smaller or larger. Most, local author type books. If we think they're going to get 20 people, then we've worked out a deal with there's a gallery flower shop next door to us, and we will use their space for a presentation. But we really find that we have the best experience with people at a table outside. We put a few chairs out there, people will join them, and then people that are in the parking lot to go to TJ Maxx or Nob Hill or whatever come over to find out what's going on. And just bringing an event out into the open where people can see it makes a big difference in visibility. Trying to get somebody to see something that we post on Facebook or our email newsletter or whatever. You can do hundreds of those things, and then a person comes in the day after and said, "Hey, what was that you were doing yesterday?" You're like, so just getting it out in front of people is something that has worked for us. And if the weather's nice, I recommend it.
And that's a beyond bookstores idea, in the sense that you're literally moving beyond the bookstore walls. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Does anybody else on the call have experience in that kind of what's a couple other bookstore owners experience with going to other retailers or events or whatever to spread the word or to sell books? I'm curious.
That's my entire business model. This is Brecha from Riverdog Book Company, but it's my first meeting, so I don't want to take up time talking about what I do. I'm really interested in hearing what everyone else is doing, but I did have a question about the workshops that you were talking about. Since it is my first meeting with you all, were those workshops designed only for this group? Are you looking to add more people to the group? Are those workshops going to be open to people outside of this group? Just looking for a little more information about that.
I think our thinking at this point is that we want to establish a cohort that is somewhat cohesive for the balance of the year and work with that cohort so that we can go more deeply and with each other and measure success in a meaningful way. So it would be nice by the end of the year to have some metrics that say, we tried this and it yielded these results. That's hard to do. But if we can limit the variables and have to the participants that are committed to trying things in any of these 4 strategic paths, then I think we have a better shot at doing that.
Yeah, I think what we'll do too is put together a cohort, a group that's from this, everybody's online here, anybody that responds afterwards, because we'll provide a link to this discussion, and we'll also provide the 2 decks, the survey and the next steps decks. And then we'll probably start with that group and break it into people who want the X workshop or Y workshop, and put together a leader. It'd be one of us or one of you. And I think we can, as the schedule is, we can put that together in the next month or so. So we definitely will have a specific plan and an invite. We'll share it among the group we have now. It may be good, or it would be really good if you could put your email address into chat if you're interested in the workshop. We have almost everybody's name, I just noticed, but also your email address would be good, and we'll invite you. And we have a lot of people already on the list, but we want to make sure we get them all.
Well, and I want to honor that there are not a lot, but there are several really great things that are going on. What Eileen and Neba and are doing with the bookstore certification program. I've been through 2 of those and participated in one, and they're excellent. Of course, Mark, I see you, and the PAS and the bookstore training group is just an amazing effort, and continues to shape so many stores. And Jill, the work that I'm getting to do with your help in masterminds, I'm going to try to become a mastermind. So there's a lot of really good things. I think what's unique about this space is we want to create an incubation space for ideas we haven't tried before. So it's not ready for prime time to go and train the world and say, hey, here's how you do this, because we don't know. We're really creating an incubation exploration space with each other, with a bunch of people who are coming from different perspectives with different levels of expertise, so that we can learn together, and then hopefully have some things that are meaningful that could become part of training programs or other places. But one of the things we learned, Praveen, in the Reimagining workshop is that there are so many ideas, and this is really an extension of that workshop. Steve and I, you paired us randomly. We enjoyed the pairing and then have continued. And that's the power of this dialogue that we hope to continue. But the incubation space, that's the idea of the next few months in these 4 areas, is to look at what can we do that we haven't tried before, or at least not in this way, and what are the results, and how can we communicate that meaningfully inside the industry.
Yeah, and I think we'll try and coordinate a bit with Jill, who's had a lot of experience now doing a monthly workshop, that we'll put together some workshops with some of her advice and participation, hopefully too.
So
Any other questions?
I have a follow-up comment about what I was saying about the outdoor event. Just because I was thinking about this, I don't really like to do offsite events. When we do outdoor events, we always sell the books inside. We have them stacked on the counter, so people have to come inside the store, so that any new faces that come because of the outside event, they have to come into the store and see it. When we do the events next door to buy the book, the author always says, go next door and get the book and come back. We just always do it that way because we're always trying to create foot traffic in our store. And I guess the flip side of that is what Praveen's doing, and having amazing events offsite, and doing a great job, but he's in a lot bigger market than we are, so we're a small community. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, Brad, it seems like you're using authors the way people used to use barkers at carnivals.
Absolutely. In fact, before digital event tickets, we used to be the box office for anything local that we could possibly get to sell. We did it for free to get people to sell tickets to the local community theater or their school play or whatever, because that just meant that people came in that normally wouldn't do that. But now everybody uses a digital ticket of some sort, so we don't get that opportunity.
We have ideas about that because I think that's a great principle.
Well, and we want to honor your time and make sure that we effectively use it. And today we just we owed you a follow-up to the interviews that we've had, and we're excited to have a focus, even though it's 4 focuses, even though it's a 4-way strategic focus over the next months and a path. And as you look at the slide deck, you'll see different ideas for pursuing these paths, which are, I'm calling them all workshops, but they don't all necessarily have to feel like a training workshop that is traditional. It can be in a different form. And so that's what we're working on now. And again, we're looking for co-leaders and people who can help shape those workshops. So if one of these strategic lines matters most to you, or you feel like you've got some facilitative skill to bring to it, please join us in that way. Otherwise, we'll put it together and try to put together frameworks where you guys talk and we incubate new ideas and actions.
Yeah, and if you want, I'm going to leave the chat open, even then not end the conversation entirely for a few minutes so I can copy the whole thing. But if you want to put your name in and just say you're interested in volunteering to help in some way, that would be useful too. It doesn't have to be, that you've identified what you're going to do, or, a special workshop that you want to either participate in or run. Be great just to have a more of a, shared sense of experience and interest. Any other questions? Any final questions?
Yeah.
Paveen?
So Steve and Lisa, if we have a minute, I would like to just, you had asked me to invite some of the volunteer advisors who, we've been tapping into for growing and expanding the Reimagining Bookstores work. And I was able to persuade and have Sandra Janoff join us today. So I just wanted to briefly introduce Sandra to this group and also invite her to, just make a comment about, what she's observing and seeing here. So I've been working with Sandra for about 10 years now, and she's a best-selling author and an organizational expert with a PhD. And the expertise Sandra brings to the table is really, she has transformed or rather helped people transform large complex systems involving multiple organizations all over the world in all kinds of settings, business settings, nonprofit settings, government settings. So she has, just decades of very, very rich experience, which we desperately need in the bookstore, industry. And she's been tremendously helpful with the, the reimagining and reinvention of Kepler's. So Sandra, and you guys can see Sandra on the Zoom screen. She's zooming in from our house in Pennsylvania. So Sandra, you want to say anything else to just to complete your introduction and just share any comment or what you see at work here?
You're muted, Sandra.
There you go. I'll start with a thank you and appreciation for everything you said, Praveen, but more an appreciation for what Steve and Lisa, you have done to spark energy. I mean, there are 30 people. I know we're leaving, and I'm going to take 10 more seconds because I want to respect the time boundary as well. 30 people have energy to gather at this time for an hour, and every one of you, every one of us is busy. So this means something, and your persistence and your guidance is really kind of what's enabling this to flow. All I'll say now is just continued support from me, obviously from Praveen and me in support of Praveen to support you. this exploration is just at the start of what does it mean and what can we do together. But the key word is together. So you are here together on this, in this forum, and that's a generous and a kind of heartfelt action from each one of you.
Thank you, Sandra. That's wonderful.
And Sandra, I think you said it so well. The only reason to get people together is if we work together, we use the expertise in the room. So you can watch a video, you can listen, you can read a book, but if you're going to gather together like this, or in any workshop, it's with the expectation that you're going to contribute and work with and off of and each other. So that's core to the thinking here, and to our hope. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to look at this very complex problem and
Yeah.
opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you all. It's 1 o'clock, so we're out here on the West Coast, on the left coast. So we'll say goodbye, but it's been terrific. And again, I'm going to leave it open. If you haven't put your name and your bookstore or your publication company or whatever in the chat, please do so. And if you're interested in participating in any particular way or in general, put that in too. So thank you so much. We'll gather this group together again, and we'll send out 2 decks plus the link to the Zoom call to everybody who participated and those who couldn't as well.
Thank you all.
Thank you.